Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. I'm Andia, a licensed addiction counselor, and along with my co-host, Laura Kissman, a quantum nutritionist, we will be inviting expert scientists, clinicians, survivors, and thrivers to distill their pearls of wisdom attained from applying quantum biology to their fields of research and everyday lives. Our goal is to bring you easy to understand principles and practices about the study of light, water, and magnetism so you can take your health into your own hands. This episode is sponsored by VIVARAYS, the only eyewear company that truly understands your biology. VIVARAYS are advanced blue light glasses designed with circadian biology in mind. Unlike typical blue blockers, they filter light in harmony with your body's natural rhythms, helping you sleep deeper, feel more energized, and protect your long-term health. We love companies that support biology-backed wellness, and VIVARAYS is leading the way. Use code QUANTUMHEALTHY at VIVARAYS.com to save 15% and support your sleep, focus, and natural energy the way nature intended. Enjoy this episode.
Welcome to Quantum Healthy. Today we have a very special guest, Sally K. Norton. And I'm just coming up here. She holds a nutrition degree from Cornell University and a master's degree in public health. Her path to becoming a leading expert on dietary oxalate includes a prior career working at major medical schools in medical education and public health research. Her personal healing experience inspired years of research that led her to her book, which I'm holding for those on YouTube, called Toxic Superfoods: How Oxalate Overload is Making You Sick and How to Get Better. And it's available everywhere books are sold. And she has a latest project, the Low Oxalate Cook Book, which is now finally available because I think a lot of her clients and followers were all desperately asking for more practical advice. So welcome, Sally.
Thank you. It's really fun to be with you guys. I'm looking
I know we've been giggling already, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
Well, hopefully we'll have some more giggles, but we're going to get into some more serious stuff here. But to start, we think like our listeners may have never heard of you or the book. I know my clients are familiar. Some of them are familiar with your book because that's been their prescription is to buy the book and get familiar when I've seen signs of oxalate toxicity. But could you tell us a little bit about your own oxalate poisoning history, how you had to learn the hard way? As you've joked, even from a Ivy League nutritionist, we just love to hear your story and how it's brought you to today.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had a long time interest in nutrition and preventing chronic illness, preventing disease. Probably because I had a rough time in childhood. Before school age, I was on the couch with ear infections and strep infections, and they were spooning liquid penicillin into me, which is most unpleasant, let me tell you. And then I had a tonsillectomy, which is traumatic for me, all before kindergarten.
Oh, wow.
And so by kindergarten, I was already preaching the gospel of what you're supposed to eat and into eating well and love food, love my vegetables. None of my siblings cared about them, but I was right in there for the chard, the beet greens, the whatever, we played with rhubarb, but those are foods that are containing a lot of oxalate. And chances are, in retrospect, now what I know is that kids who have issues like I was having are probably suffering with oxalate toxicity already. You can get oxalate as a fetus from your mom's body. It hangs around in the amniotic fluid. It's coming from the blood. It's also can be released in breast milk. Now, I wasn't a breastfed baby, but today's babies, most moms are heavily encouraged, if they possibly can, to breastfeed. You literally can take this natural poison that's in foods we trust, that's now in your body after meals and accumulating over years, and deliver it. So anyway, in my story, I think it does go far back. And those of us, you don't have to go back though that far to really get yourself in trouble by over consuming these. So I was doing everything to the book. I was a gardener since age 9, eating fresh foods, and my parents and grandparents role modeled scratch cooking. I'm a good cook. I used to cook for the family, gardening, cooking, being all organic, being all plant-centric, being in the nutrition world. When I was in school in the mid and late 80s, vegetarianism was really strong. and the professors and things were into it, and they were creating a new sub interest group in the Dietetics Association for people who wanted to do vegetarian diets. Before that, that association never thought vegetarianism was the appropriate way to deliver nutrients, which I agree with now. But we were, in my age, in the 80s, things were coming into this acceptance of plant-centric eating, which can increase your consumption of plant toxins. And this oxalic acid in the plants is the most concerning of all the plant toxins in my view, but because it's harder to have a workaround. With lectins, if you could possibly teach people, for example, how you can prepare them in a certain way. So back to my story, I became struggling with back pain and arthritis as a teenager. During my 20s, I had a tremendous problem with inflammatory arthritis and problems with my feet. I had to leave Cornell, where I was getting my nutrition degree, to have foot surgery. And I had to take the entire 4-year leave because I still wasn't getting better after the surgery. And eventually, with kind of accidentally eating less vegetables, but I thought it was the swimming and so on, I got so I could wear shoes and function, but I never could do sports and could never really go barefoot until later on, almost 50 years old, I realized a connection between arthritis and my diet of sweet potatoes and chard, thanks to the Vulva Pain Foundation. So they pointed me to the idea that there's such a thing as a connective tissue disorder, a pelvic pain disorder, and if you change the diet and you take out these high oxalate foods, you can get relief from these things. And I was like, still like really puzzling, like, really, what? That's a kidney stone problem. We know in standard nutrition and standard medicine that high oxalate foods contribute to kidney stones, and anyone with kidney disease needs to be on an oxalate-aware eating. But this whole idea that it's beyond the kidneys was invisible. And it turns out it existed. In my research, I found out, wait a minute, they already knew about this in the 1840s, all the way to the 1940s, and now we pretend now we don't know about it. So the whole thing is just these weird surprises, like, why is somebody who's so healthy so sick? I mean, so many problems with fatigue, connective tissue pains, bad vision, chronic sinus infections every year until I got on this diet. Now I haven't had a single one since. And
Oh, wow.
it's been 11 and a half years. So I, thanks to the Vulva Pain Foundation, had this later on, 3 years after, or 4 years after I learned about them, had this weird insight that my arthritis and the oxalates in my diet were connected. And when I went on this diet, all kinds of stuff disappeared, including a post-hysterectomy. I needed a hysterectomy. It turned out I had endometriosis, severe chemical sensitivities, EMF sensitivities, just all kinds of problems. And I couldn't recover. I was completely disabled on the couch. So my doctor said, well, your tests look good. You look good. Let me send you to the sleep doctor. And that whole test where they hook you up with wires on your head and your arms and your legs, you're like, am I supposed to sleep here in this strange bed with all these wires? Yeah, you are. Well, the equipment showed that even though I had no idea because I was such a zombie, my brain was waking up 29 times each hour through the whole 5.5 hours of sleep time in the 7 hours that you're in bed. It's like, oh, okay, so that sleep disorder pretty much disappeared. I tried 3 years of treating it, but once I went low oxalate, it took less than 10 days for it to go away.
Oh my God. That's fabulous. Like fabulous news and hope for people.
Fabulous news, and it's evidence of the neurotoxicity of the oxalates in the food we're eating.
Wow. Wow.
And that's a big lesson for me working with people, just how neurotoxic this is. It makes sense because nerves are the most delicate, sensitive tissues we have. They have to be very able to control their environment. They have to have enough energy to maintain their protective sheaths, the myelin, in their function. They have to handle little charged ions, this energy force, this energy field is under careful control. And they're sending a certain kind of information through the body by basically controlling little calcium ions. And all cells control little calcium ions to function. All of life is about the electromagnetics and controlling and having cycles of electromagnetics, because it's like the polarity, as we say, of a membrane is moving on and off, on and off. And in nerves, that on and off polarity is what it does for a living. And when you start interfering with that, with a calcium chelator. Oxalic acid is a grabber of calcium and it disrupts the control of calcium in the body. And so the nerves are particularly unhappy about that because that's how they function. So it's basic little simple problem of something that grabs calcium and forms calcium oxalate stones in the body is interrupting the electromagnetics of a cell and all of the life force.
Wow, that's a beautiful quantum look at oxalates here. Can you just really briefly share what is an oxalate? So for the listeners who are still like, well, what exactly is an oxalate?
Talking about anyway, what the heck? Because who's heard of the term? Like hardly anyone's heard the word oxalate. And oxalates, we say plural. It starts off the parent compound is oxalic acid, which is a small molecule of 2 carbons and 4 oxygens on it. It has a negative charge, and then it dumps the other proton and will have double negative charge, which is why it likes calcium, because calcium is positive double charge. Oxalic acid tends to go to a positive negative charge, and they form this little marriage. And once you get about 8 pairs of individual little calcium oxalate molecules, they can form a crystal. So they'll what we call precipitate out and start this little seed nanocrystal, super, super invisible. I mean, 2 carbons, this is like a water molecule. I mean, we're talking so super, super tiny. But think about this little molecule that has 4 oxygens on it, which is a pretty heavy duty thing. Oxygen is that stuff that bleaches, right? It's pretty like harsh and pro-oxidative and has these negative charges. It's forming stones and crystals. Well, crystals have electromagnetic sides. You know, if you think about a diamond, there's many facets to it. So a crystal has many sides or facets to it. And one side is going to be positive, one's going to be negative, and so on. And that's also just this kind of disrupting kind of weird magnetism that destroys the membrane structures because of that electromagnetic field that the crystal itself has. So the membrane, we call it a double layered, like there's 2 leaflets, we call it, in membrane structures. There's an outer shell of fat molecules and an inner shell.
Mhm.
And so on the inner shell, you have different kinds of fats. And there's a certain one that belongs only there. But when there's a crystal of oxalate near the cell, it causes enough damage that the cell loses control over that structure, and those molecules do an inversion and flip to the outer leaflet. So now the kind of sentries, the immune cells and things that are looking at stuff, they'll see, ooh, that cell's damaged because that shouldn't be there. And they start preparing to take that cell away.
Okay.
It, if we were to go deeper into the cell, into the mitochondria, do you think it destroys the inner mitochondrial membrane as well?
It very
Probably not.
much messes up mitochondria from the damage of the membranes and from the damage of the control over calcium. Because the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria store and move and kind of control calcium overall in the cell cytoplasm as well, where in the cytoplasm it's doing different messaging and telling the cell how to run, what to do. So the calcium molecule inside the cell is the messenger that tells a certain village to go start making applesauce. And, you know, like the kingdom, maybe something to the mitochondria and the some wisdom in the cell, there's a higher power telling the cell, okay, time to, I detect sugar. We need some more of this. We should pull sugar in. We should pull these nutrients in. Like there's something to do right here. Oh, this is like there's always some new project to do. And the one who tells each part of the cell, each part of the membrane to do what they should do is calcium. So calcium is sent out by the wisdom of the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria to tell us, oh, time to make more insulin, time to pull in some glucose. You need this, you should do this. We got to produce this. We got to start reproducing ourselves. We're injured. Hey, wait, immune cells are coming. Like there's a lot of activity. And the one who's helping everybody know what to do when is this little tiny ion of calcium. And both the mitochondria and other suborganelles organelles have to have some control. And it can mess it up completely to have oxalic acid rolling around in your cells.
So is this the same calcium that Dr. Martin Pall talks about with calcium efflux with when we have oxidative stress and what we call non-native electromagnetic frequencies like our Wi-Fi and things like that disrupting a calcium. They talk about
But
calcium.
you can have this aberrant behavior in the movement of calcium in and out of cells. And it can flood,
Right,
you can get calcium flooding into a cell. And when that's happening,
right.
oxalate's going to follow calcium around and calcium follows oxalate around. So
Oh,
whenever
wow.
any, so you get one kind of stress and it's going to increase the stress of the oxalate. You have oxalate stress and it makes all those other things more stressful. So when you're poisoned, you tend to be much more sensitive to electromagnetic fields and chemicals, and any other stressor is really that much more toxic. But you have this silent toxic effects of constant exposure to oxalate that you would expect something that's poisonous, because this is not an allergy. This is a poison. So in our minds, a poison is something you accidentally ingest, gives you a stomach ache, you spit it out, you call the doctor, you get your stomach pumped, and you survive.
Mhm.
Acute, that's like an acute poisoning, or or you get sick for 3 days with a bug. But this is not working that way. This is happening so subtly that you don't notice anything, and you eat it breakfast, lunch, and dinner for years, and it's slowly, insidiously poisoning you. It's the perfect criminal because it's
Oh my
hidden
gosh.
in things we trust, like a Trojan horse, hiding there, being actually promoted as safe. You would never suspect it consciously. And even your whole body's wisdom, I think your ability to hear that, hey, this isn't good for you, goes away. The more poisoned you are, the less you can actually tune in to your own, wise kind of instinctual tendencies. Whereas a little baby will say no thanks to the spinach almost every time. That's one of
Mhm.
these classic high oxalate foods. Give a baby a bunch of Swiss chard and they'll be, oh, that's pretty. They'll rip it out and throw it on the floor. I'm not going to think of it as food.
So
You
you,
know,
oh, go
for
ahead.
I did an alkaline diet too many years. Thankfully, I learned about oxalates early enough that I changed all the greens in the diet. Like we would make these smoothies with avocado and cucumber, and then a source of greens. And I don't know if it was your work. It may have been your work back in 2015, but yeah, thank God I stopped the spin. But I did it for a bit, maybe for a year. So I already have that source. Then I got into medical medium diet where I was
Oh,
celery juicing in the morning. And guess what? I could barely make it to the bathroom after drinking this, down this big glass. And I finally quit it because my bladder was talking to me. I had to listen to my body and not listen to the mind control of this person who's, giving me
so
this.
good that you're listening to your body. It's so good.
But I'm
Women
worried.
do
Yeah, I'm
not.
worried that there's oxalates in
Yeah,
there.
because your bladder is the pathway of oxalate out of the body. Because it has to, the way to
Right.
get it out of your bloodstream is your kidneys. Your kidneys get rid of the oxalate for the most part. And so your bladder is one of the last stops as this stuff has been concentrated in your urine. And you get so you're peeing out high oxalate urine and you start to destroy the bladder lining. Um, and then some people will get severe bladder pain because the nerves are starting to get exposed from this damage to the lining of the bladder.
And I was there.
Gosh.
Thankfully, I'm not now. I've changed my diet and lifestyle dramatically. Yeah, but I doubled over in the kitchen and thinking, just breathing through the pain to think, how can I get to the bathroom? Because now it's not only do I just have pain, I have the urgency and also frequency on top of that,
And
and
maybe nighttime arousals where you have to pee at night.
yeah, it's over. Thank God. Yeah,
Yeah,
thank God.
that's a
Saw the light.
classic. That's a classic sign of oxalate problems, is any of
That's
that
it.
frequent, urgent, overnight. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
And
I
then
know
you get to
people
the
are,
point where you're leaking too.
yeah,
Right.
people are going to be asking and thinking right now because you just mentioned kidney stones too. Does overeating oxalates cause kidney stones, or is there a relationship there? Can you speak to that?
Right. So your classic kidney stone, about 80% of all kidney stones are made principally of calcium oxalate. You can't build a kidney stone if you don't provide the oxalate. And 75% of the oxalate that gets into your urine is coming from your diet or your vitamin C supplement. So yeah, if you don't eat oxalate, you can't build a kidney stone. You can't possibly come up with enough of the stuff to do it.
Okay.
Can you repeat what you said about the vitamin C supplement? Sorry.
Yeah, because isn't that shocking? Right. So in the, say, Swiss chard, sweet potatoes and almonds and cashews and peanuts and turmeric and potatoes and sweet potatoes and bran and all these high oxalate foods that I talk about, that's why I called it toxic superfoods, because these are mostly
Right.
pretty and bright and promoted. That's the direct oxalic acid plus calcium oxalate crystals, which you don't absorb, but they abrade your digestive tract. So you get about 50% or more of the oxalate in your urine is coming straight from your potatoes, peanuts, and chocolate, and so on. And then another big chunk of it is coming from vitamin C fortification or vitamin C supplements because vitamin C naturally degenerates into oxalic acid. So the vitamin C gets into your cells, eyeballs, brain cells, wherever, and degenerates. Some of it will degenerate into oxalate. So you put oxalate into the cells in that way, and the body will try to get it out. And you can literally just get oxalate poisoning from too much vitamin C alone.
Mm.
And some
Wow.
people are doing since COVID, oh, I might as well have 10 or 12 grams of vitamin C a day. Pretty much just going to destroy your health. Isn't
We
it?
had Morley Robbins on the podcast, and he very interesting. Learned a lot about copper deficiency, and in his root cause protocol, he recommends people stop all ascorbic acid and or any citrates. Which that's a question I have for you because I know there's some benefit to the citrates,
Very
but
much so.
yeah. So, but then he encourages people to take to eat to get vitamin C in a whole food form. But would that whole food form be like I have acerola?
Right.
How
Acerola is very concentrated and it might as well be a vitamin C supplement. It's so concentrated. So it's
so
really
con
about the amount. It's
it's
about the
amounting.
amount. Um,
Okay.
there's the research, of course, isn't selecting people or feeding them acerola cherry, so, but it's pretty clear just from the biochemistry itself that even in a bottle, vitamin C can turn into oxalate. Like it doesn't even need enzymes to do it. It's both with enzymatic transformation and with just oxidation. Oxalate is the end oxidative product of the degeneration of vitamin C. And when you've got too much in your body and your cells can't use it and keep it, the cells will try to keep recycling vitamin C to some degree. If you got extra vitamin C around that you don't need, it has nothing to do but to degenerate into oxalate. And I think it varies from person to person how well you dispense of the vitamin C you don't need or don't. So some people get more sick on this C than others because it's hanging around in a more toxic way in some people than others. So I think it's hard to say like who's going to get worse on vitamin C and how much, but generally if you're taking more than about 250 a day, you are basically taking oxalate when you,
Oh.
Oh,
yeah.
well, that's not a supplement we want.
You don't need it. If you're going to eat some fresh food, you're going to get some vitamin C, things like red pepper and things like
Mhm.
that. You're going to get some
Lemons,
lettuce,
limes,
limes, yeah.
right?
Okay, speaking of the food piece, you just like listed off a bunch of foods that are oxalate heavy. Some of the oxalate heavy foods are addictive. Peanut
Yeah.
butter is very addictive, dark chocolate is very addictive. Can you speak to addiction and oxalates?
Yes, well, starting from which oxalate foods people have trouble letting go of that are clearly having addictive hooks. Tea, chocolate, potatoes, and peanuts. Those are the ones that really shine bright. It's like, really, can I just have really? And they'll go back to their potato or their, usually it's just one per person. Which one of those? And because of this neurotoxicity, that neurotoxicity makes you really vulnerable to addiction, big time.
Yeah.
It's really an addicted brain is starved for nutrients and is some form of toxicity. We're not, I think we're really quite free to be choice makers and be free to do the right things. But when you've got deficiencies and toxicity, it can show up as addiction. And we all have a degree of deficiency and toxicity, and oxalate does both. It makes your nerves toxic and it makes them deficient in calcium and potassium and all kinds of potentially B1 and B6 as well. So I'm super impressed with how getting rid of oxalates can really help people lift them into a better direction towards conquering addiction. It's
Oh,
amazing.
Wow. Did you mention chocolate? You did, right, on that list?
yep.
Yeah,
That was number two.
chocolate, peanuts,
Yeah.
potatoes, and tea. Those are the ones that people are like really hooked on, it seems. Some people
Yeah.
can get you can get mentally so in love with something and so put so much power into it and give it the power of God. It could be your quinoa, it could be your chia bowl, it could be
I
anything.
know. I
Because you
know.
can you can give away your power to anything.
And it also becomes habit, and then we get
Yeah,
lazy, right? We're like, oh, it's just easy for me to have the same breakfast every
I
day. And
love
so
my
we're
rut. Thank you very much. Leave me in my rut, please.
yeah.
And then, like, what if so caffeine, I actually quit caffeine. And a nice replacement for what I was like wanting in the morning was basically just something warm, right? So, what do I replace it with? Caffeine-free tea, like herbal tea, right? And you just said, tea's high in oxalates.
No, but
Yeah.
the herbal teas have almost no oxalate at all.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, it's
Thank you.
just black tea, decaf black tea. White tea is a type of black tea, by the way, and green teas, it's all the same. It's basically the camellia plant. So that plant produces oxalate, but something about the oxalates in the cinnamon and the other things are more crystalline or something and don't infuse out with just a 4-minute steep of tea. And so the teas except for ginger, which is a little medium high, and maybe one other one,
Mm.
all herbal teas are low oxalate.
Oh, that's great news.
Yeah, this isn't that hard a thing. Like 3 greens, go do all the lettuces and other greens. Do any other tea except the standard black tea, and you can still have that because you don't have to be zero oxalate. You just have to
Right.
like know some of these heavy hitters and quit making them staples and quit eating them as if they're like the main dish every day.
Yeah, we were going to ask you about swaps and if you could just list kind of well, you just listed a couple, but like, what are the big ones for people?
Right. So I think the biggest ones are the nuts and the spinach. So
Okay.
3 greens that we tend to eat that are high are chard, beet greens, and spinach. And they're popular because we've been told for the last 30 years that you need your dark leafy greens, and they're the darkest. Well, skip that silly idea. That is actually not sciencey. It's a fad thing. So all the other greens are low. Cabbage, arugula, lettuces of all kind, you name it, they're pretty much all low. So
Mm.
that's easy. Easy swap. Just 3 out, everybody in. And with the nuts, pretty much the whole nuts thing is not so good. Uh,
Uh-oh.
you want to get rid of the cashews and almonds and peanuts for sure. Do you really, there's a lot of toxins in these nuts and seeds because, hey, they weren't supposed to be eaten. This is a baby tree waiting to happen. Mama tree did not make that edible. She didn't want you to think it's a tasty snack. These are her babies. So, there's a lot going on there. We're like, no, I don't think so. But we think we can eat anything. We have a lot of hubris. And we're okay acting like squirrels, but we're really not. In the whole eco niche, it's really not our thing. We're not squirrels. I know it's hard to believe. But so switching out of the nut and seed thing, there's not a lot of nutty and seed replacements except for pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. And if you sprout them, you can turn them into butters. The pumpkin seed butter works really well, kind of like sesame seed butter. You can make those kind of Middle Eastern dishes with it.
Okay.
You're going to get a green color to it because pumpkin seeds are always green. So they have a little good Halloween kind of gory color, but that's your main substitute. I think if you're really into nuts and seeds, you're going to have to start getting into cheese and salami and egg, hard boiled. Find like a whole different food category and move
Hmm.
into things that actually can nourish you.
Yeah.
Are there some nuts that are less? Like, can people have a few pecans
Yes,
or walnuts? Okay.
pecans, macadamia nuts. So, and even
Okay.
pistachios, if you're using them as sort of garnishes and additions and not like
Okay.
the main dish all the time, just keep in mind, from a health standpoint, nuts can be a little hard on digestion. They tend to be moldy, especially pistachios are probably the moldiest of the nuts.
Oh,
Uh,
Right.
so again, they're nice treat foods. They add a lot of crunch and interesting flavor, and it's fine to have them in around your life, but not to turn them into like bread and butter type foods that you're counting on.
Which a lot of vegans tend to do. Like, and for me, when I was alkaline, I was making cashew cream sauces, for fettuccine Alfredo, and yeah,
Yes, the
and I was
classic
doing
veggie club.
Something I learned from you was I was making homemade almond milk, and the difference between homemade almond milk and the store-bought is dramatic, right? And I
Like
had
a whole factor of 10.
because and I got
A
I
hundred
had
times higher. It's like because you're
yeah,
actually using nuts to make a nice creamy solution.
right,
But in factories, they can add all these gums and goos and things and make it seem creamy with way less of the expensive ingredient.
right, and add a few other ingredients in it, sometimes
Give
vegetable
it give
oils,
it
but
that kind of body and that
right.
texture of milk, and then add back some calcium. And even though they add calcium back to it, people are, there's to some degree a high calcium meal or diet will lower the amount of oxalic acid that gets into your bloodstream. So you think, well, in the almond milk, there's not that many almonds and they're adding calcium. It's probably all canceled out and it's probably fine. You would think that, but it's not how it works at all. There has been reports in the medical literature of young children getting serious kidney damage from their parents giving them almond milk,
Mm.
Oh,
commercial almond milk.
You know,
And it's
ugh,
really fascinating because we want to believe the calcium in it is helping, but it's not.
yeah. This,
so having milk chocolate or having a piece of cheese with dark chocolate, it's not helping or helping.
Well, the milk chocolate's helpful because it has way less of the cacao powder, and that's where the
Right.
oxalates are. The oxalate doesn't stay in the fatty portion. So white chocolate, which is really just the cocoa butter, the fat portion of the cocoa, that has no oxalate at all. Remember, I said it has a charge on it, and even the crystals have charges on them. Well,
Mhm.
fats are no charge kind of molecules. So when you make vinegar, you can see the fat floating on top of when you make a salad
Mhm.
dressing, you see that separation of fat. And so when you're taking the fat out of, say, an almond or an olive, the oxalate is down in the water part, and you're taking the fat off the top when you're separating out oils. So when you're separating the oil from chocolate, you lose the oxalate. The oxalate is in the cocoa. So the powder brown stuff, the darker the chocolate, the more the oxalate in it. So if
Okay.
you move down to lower percentage and move to milk chocolate or start having white chocolate, then you're lowering your oxalate big time.
But you're not really lowering it by drinking a glass of milk with it.
You're probably getting, what's the number? The test, there's a couple tests, probably 40% less, almost half. You could reduce the amount maybe by 40%. So if you're gonna, let's say you're
Okay.
getting, just for ease of numbers, if you're getting 100 milligrams of oxalate from your chunk of chocolate, but you add enough calcium that's bioavailable enough to bind that, if we're lucky, it's going to lower it by 40%. So you'd end up effectively getting 60 milligrams instead of 100. So it's very helpful because it's reduced, but still 60 is a still rugged amount. So it depends on
Mm.
sort of the denominator. Like if it's just one square and you're also having cheese or milk with it, you're good to go. But if it's four squares, you
Mhm.
still may be getting enough that it's still a toxic enough level. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
this makes me think about people with food addiction, like myself. And like, I had no business being around nuts because you know how much that, like, the whole container would get eaten, right? And so so
Mhm.
you mentioned like if you're just using it as a garnish or what have you. And when we can address our food addictions, I like that alone is gonna, I mean, I'm talking about myself, for that alone lowered my oxalate for sure.
Yeah,
The
right.
consumption. Like,
Yes. And sometimes it's only the one crazy food that we've got this over, obsession with that is really the problem.
hmm
It can be for me at the end, I was eating sweet potatoes every day and chard twice a week. It really was get those two foods out and quit adding an occasional kiwi. And that's all there was to it. But that was your favorite food, that was your way of getting butter and salt. That was a convenience because I could set it up in my delay oven at night at bedtime and have it for breakfast and have leftovers with lunch or dinner. It was
yeah.
super easy. It was my rut and it was delicious because I would cook it till it gets sugary and put plenty of butter and salt on it. I was like, and it seemed like when I would eat the sweet potatoes again, it didn't make me feel bad. In fact, I felt fine. You know why? I bet Laura knows why.
I do know why, and that's one of my questions. I want to talk to you about dumping. You stopped the dumping? Is that
You
why?
stopped the dumping. So dumping is this kind of pet term, but it's really about the body having to deaccumulate because when we're eating it, you grow up and you start having peanut butter and potatoes and chocolate. By the time you're one, they're giving you chocolate cake. And then, by the time you're two, you're having peanut butter and potatoes. And man, throw some tater tots or fries at a kid and they'll have so much fun. It's entertaining the adults. Like it's a thing. So you're over the years, because you've been eating this way since the dawn of your life, you've got oxalate crystals in your thyroid gland, your bones, your bone marrow, where you make the new blood cells. You've got it in critical tissues, including your eyes, brains, jaws, teeth, and other essential organs. And the body doesn't want it there, but it's there because you keep eating it every day, and there's no room in the bloodstream to have it go out and in at the same time. The bloodstream is kind of a one-way traffic. You got to have it going out or in, but if it's coming in from the diet, how do you get it to go out again? Because the body has to protect the blood. If you got too much oxalate in the blood, you'll have a heart attack or a stroke, or you'll blow out your kidneys. The rest of the body's not interested in any of those three occurrences. The shoulder joint is not interested in dead kidneys, heart attacks, or strokes because, hey, we need all those things to stay a shoulder. Otherwise, we're just rotting meat in the ground. So the body's smart. It knows to not, it's got to hold on to it. And so it's doing this to holding on. Now, when you stop eating it and the bloodstream is a little emptier, it's like, wait a minute, it's not coming in anymore. There's a little moment. There's an opportunity. There's a low level of oxalate in the bloodstream. Everybody knows about this. Like, this is good news. Well, if the tissues are all simultaneously celebrating this moment, turning on a whole new metabolism of deaccumulation, your thyroid gland, your bones, your bone marrow, your jaw, your teeth, your eyes, your sinuses are all like in the party of releasing oxalate back, mobilizing a toxin. So now you have a toxic waste site with workers coming in, all these immune cell workers coming in to dig up the stuff, just making a big mess. If you've ever been in a construction site, either a house being remodeled or a street being repaved, it's messy. And you're creating that kind of mess when you're ripping out your kitchen or you're ripping out your oxalate crystals out of your thyroid gland. And this is not good to live in this house that's being reconstructed. It's super toxic.
That's what we're doing when we're ripping the oxalates away.
Pardon?
That's what we're doing when we're ripping the oxalates out.
We're making a mess. We're repoisoning ourselves. So those old smoothies and the old, celery juice and the nut habit is being revisited all over again. That same toxin is as toxic going in. Oh, no, actually, it's more toxic going out than it was going in. It's worse on the way out because you've got to do this destruction. You have to have these immune cells sending cytokines and all this pro-inflammatory kind of chemistry that makes you feel bad, and it starts making you acidic because of all that. You're losing potassium, you're draining your system out of more calcium, you're already making yourself deficient in these minerals on the way in. Now you're using another set of them on the way out, and you can get into gout, you can have a heart attack, arrhythmias, hypertension, tooth pain, eye grit coming out, cloudy urine full of crystals. Like, it is not happy to be this deaccumulation process. So when I would go back and eat my sweet potatoes, then the traffic direction would change because now it's coming in again and the body's like, darn it, party's over, kids. Got to stop dumping it out of the tissues because here it comes again. So I'd eat my sweet potatoes and I'd go, the kind of oxalate that's in sweet potatoes doesn't bother me because when I eat sweet potatoes, I'm fine. See, I didn't understand it. Right. I didn't understand that by going back to that toxin, but at a lesser dose, because now I'm a little bit like, I know sweet potatoes aren't great, but I'm going to have them here and there and have a lightly smaller portion. That's actually smart because we can stop that excessive, construction fun, sun, this whole toxicity of the deaccumulation. You can take a break from it. So it gets real confusing because you think, well, I did that low oxalate thing for 3 months and I'm fine now, so I can eat whatever I want. You start eating this stuff and you don't feel worse until you keep eating it for another 6 months and you're like, hey, I'm back to where I was. What happened? I thought I was done with that oxalate thing. That's not how poisoning works. You don't go back to the poison that makes you sick because you feel a little better, but you do a little bit in a constructive way to kind of manage this recovery process, which is a long recovery process. It took you 30, 40, 50, 60 years to get here. You're not going to deaccumulate all this safely, quickly. The safest way is the slow way, and that slow way may be years, decades.
So you're saying don't do it cold turkey or you're going to have a huge construction site.
Potentially, you can make yourself like a big mess. You
Which
could.
which could be in the form of someone going on a carnivore diet, right?
It can be. And so some percentage, we don't know because no one would dare do that research out here if we're promoting carnivore. So
Mhm.
you're like the odd man out if everyone else looks good online in carnivore, except you're sick. What's wrong with you? But there's a
Right.
fair amount of them who come running to me pretty unhappy that the person who told them, the person they paid to go to their program, to go cold turkey and just do it and get through that initial adjustment
Mhm.
phase and don't worry how sick you are. No, they got really sick on it. So some do. I've been interviewed by carnivores who are just starting to do this deaccumulation after 3 years, and another one who is just doing the deaccumulation after 6 years. And another
Wow.
one showed up recently. I think he's just been about 8 years and he's starting to see it in himself. So it's real different for each person.
Hmm. That's one thing I will say why I encourage your book. I'm not your biggest fan here, I guess, with this book, but because you really go into detail about oxalate dumping and because it's dangerous. If people, think, oh, I've got the solution, going on a low oxalate diet, extremely low oxalate diet, let's say, or a no oxalate diet,
Yeah, with the
it can
carnivores,
be
no, because it's all in the plant food. So when you're eating just meat, you're getting zero.
exactly
Yeah,
right.
but usually there's little chocolate and tea cheating in the carnivore land, which is good.
Well, not the strict ones don't tend to, right?
Yeah, but the
Yeah.
usual follower is like, oh, that's cool that you eat ribeye, salt, and nothing else, but I'm going to have a little chocolate treat
Right.
because it's Friday, it's my birthday, it's my dog's birthday,
It's
Yeah.
it's
Everyone else.
Thursday night. There's always some reason to do what you want, and you should do what you want. I don't think just saluting to someone's theory
Mhm.
is productive, really. You want to be in relationship with your body and your objectives and keep open-minded learning. Don't get too convinced that you've got all the answers because human beings don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
That actually is a question we talked about, Andy and I, just before you came on. We wanted to ask you was, if people eat things in the right season, that's something that we really try to promote in the quantum biology space is to eat, what's at your latitude, for example, and your season and what's local. And so I just wonder, we were wondering, if you were to eat some oxalates in August when, I don't know, let's say the Swiss chard is grown in your garden, might you do better then? Do you know anybody researching that than if you ate it in
Well,
January
I
in
think
Canada?
the bigger picture is that because we don't eat seasonally anymore, and you can get
Hmm.
raspberries and some of this isn't even a seasonal question because the chocolate bar was invented 150 years ago. Nobody ate chocolate. And peanuts as human food was invented 100 and 200 years ago. It was invented
Hmm.
after the Civil War in the US. Really got going in
That's right.
around 1900. So no one ate peanuts. Like it just didn't happen, really. And that's true with so many foods. Like even the carrot didn't exist till the Renaissance. There was no such thing as an edible carrot. The wild carrot is completely inedible. So there's a bigger story here than just pretending there's seasons. Wait a minute. There's a whole novelty. If you take 600-year period, in the last 400 to 600 years, we've added tea in so many foods. The potato wasn't on the menu. The tea was, many of these foods weren't even on the menu. And so certainly you wouldn't be living on Swiss chard 600 years ago. You were too busy working to think 20 calories of Swiss chard was worth the effort. You had to burn wood for that. I mean, it takes a lot of resources to process fresh vegetables, and you didn't have a freezer. What are you gonna do with them? What are you gonna do with that? I mean, it's so much energy to cook when you don't have electricity. You're going to take down the woolly mammoth. You're going to set up a barbecue. You're going to have a party for a week, and you're not going to have that many sweet potato salads. You're not going to order out even for coleslaw. You're just going to have a good time on woolly mammoth meat.
I told you we were going to giggle.
I mean, you just have to laugh at the absurdity. So I'm
Right.
kind of saying that question in itself is laced with lots of assumptions that you're supposed to eat the way you're eating at all, whether it's August or October or January. But what the seasonality does for us is that in the winter, particularly in northern latitudes where you have snow and ice on the ground, you are not eating broccoli and raspberries. Raspberries have a 2 week season. And so every winter you do that deaccumulation process. So you can only do so much damage in the 6 months that you were eating the oxalates, and then you've got your 4 months of wintertime at least, where at best
Ah.
you've got some ramps in the spring, and you're still living on squirrel and deer and eel and fish, and you're really kind of carnivore in the winter.
Hmm.
And so you can go real low every winter, and if every child and person was allowed to go 4 months on no oxalate, you could survive your 6 months of foolishness, right? And that'd be fine. But you
Yeah.
can only do so much of that. And if you're doing a chuck wagon out the west, if you're leaving Ohio and heading to California in a chuck wagon, you're hunting your way across the country. You don't carry a refrigerator.
In
Yeah.
1883.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Yeah, no, eating seasonally, that's a huge plus when we
mhm.
look at it through the lens of oxalates
It
because
is.
yeah.
Really true. Yeah,
That's
thank
why
you.
I wrote an article called Lost Seasonality and Overconsumption of Plants, Risking Oxalate Toxicity for a journal back
Mm,
in 2015, I think it was published, or no, 2018 or something like that.
If we
okay.
find it,
Because
we'll
that was my first, like, wait a minute. And from an ancestral perspective,
mhm.
this is just got it. It's one way we've really, modern life is getting us more and more in trouble with oxalate overload.
Wow.
Yeah.
If we find that, we can put it in the show notes.
Oh yeah, it's
Or
easy. Get it
if you
for you.
sign that,
Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
I know we're getting short on time, probably. Can we ask? There's a couple things. I have so many questions, but testing. I used to use Viome with my clients to test their microbiomes, and I was always looking for Oxalobacter, which is Oxalobacter formigens, this bacteria that's my understanding is it helps to break down oxalates the best in the body.
Yeah, it's obligated. It requires oxalate to survive. It needs oxalate.
Oh, so okay,
Pretty
that's
much loves it. I don't know why anybody would grow up to love oxalate. What a horrible life that would be. Don't be reincarnated as one of those.
so at the time, I just for myself personally, I think I found out I didn't have Oxalobacter, and I assumed it was because maybe I'd had antibiotics, in my
Yeah, it's
past.
very sensitive to antibiotics.
Right.
So
But I had,
around by age 2, we tend to get it from playing in the dirt or whatever, but only about 70% of people ever get inoculated to begin with in life. And then
oh,
once we have antibiotics, it wipes it out. So very few people have that one in particular. Now there's lactobacilli and there's other things that can deconstruct oxalate in the colon to help with the body burden of oxalate and help the body excrete oxalate into the colon. It can be a path. In fact, those bacteria, because they like to eat it, they can tell the body, "Hey, give me some oxalate, give me some oxalate," because the bacteria seem to have a certain amount of power to tell us how to live. They're busy
mm-hmm.
helping, the body is trying to garden the bacteria. You've got to have a healthy gut in order to have a healthy microbiome. You can't force it on a sick body because it's really the body's the gardener that decides what grows as best it can, what grows in the body. A healthy body can help sort of select what bacteria ought to be thriving in the colon. So you can't just fix a microbiome. You have to have a healthy body because that's the gardener. And you can't have a deranged, absent gardener and have your garden grow correctly. You do need a gardener. So there's a lot of confusion about all that. The people several companies have tried to produce a probiotic that would restore some oxalate degrading potential in your microbiome. And the ones that have the most hope was a fairly new company that's working on a giant ecosystem, an ecosystem that can adapt to different changes in your diet from day to day and from season to season. And you really have to think about functional groups now. We used to like pick out our 10 favorite bacteria and say, we need those. But that does not work. They finally realizing that you need to
Mm-hmm.
think function and you need to categorize bacteria more by function than anything else and get the various functional groups defined and have those functions available and have some mix of those available. And hopefully you can correct the energy production in the cells of the gut. You can make the cells of the gut less sick so that they can control the oxygen level, and the colon should be anaerobic and that they can put out the right mucus as part of feeding the microbiome that it's trying to create. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, no, it does. And you see, we would go even further and try to get people to get their bellies in the sun in
Mm,
the high UVB in the summer to help,
mhm.
populate the microbiome. I don't know if you've,
Interesting. I have
yeah.
a little vitamin D lamp and a red heat lamp, and I've come to using them in the morning for like 15 minutes just to be in light every morning, just to sit in that kind of healing space. And
Mhm.
there's something to really the simplest things,
Right. The
like
only,
our relationship with the sun.
Yes, like going
yeah,
outside with no glasses on in the morning to see sunrise is
Yeah,
the
yeah.
simplest thing.
Remember to walk around blind when you're doing the walk.
yeah,
I like to
naked
walk around.
eyes. And then of course, blocking all this blue light that we're in, all three of us are probably in front of screens way more than we even want. But yeah,
And
um,
have been for most of our careers.
I
And
know.
at my age, at 61, that's a long time because really my generation, when I was at Cornell, we were the first ones to write our papers on Macintosh computers at the computer lab.
Mhm,
Was up late writing all my papers at the computer lab at Cornell. None of us were required to own computers yet
mhm,
before that. But then from that point forward, I got a typewriter for high school graduation. And then 2 years later, you didn't need it except for writing your resume or
mhm.
your cover letter for your resume. You didn't
Yeah.
I was the end of the typewriter era, so my whole adulthood I've been looking at these screens.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I
here
was
I
in the Air Force. I'm just behind you by 3 years, but
oh,
I was in the Air Force when we first got computers brought in into
you
NORAD.
can remember it.
Yeah. Oh, it changed. It's changed everything. Anyway, we won't go there because nothing
But
good
it is
talk.
part of
But
like, okay, so we the elders,
yeah.
so to speak, we're this sort of end of the baby boom generation,
Mhm.
and we've been looking at the wrong light our whole adulthood.
I
Yeah.
So,
know.
if we could admit to how that's not working for us, once in a while someone coming up behind us might actually listen,
Hmm.
maybe.
No, it's true. I injured my leg last year and was no non-weight bearing for 3 months, and I moved my
3 months.
laptop. It was rough, believe me, it was really rough. But thank God it was September. It was at mid-August. And I moved outside and I was from sunrise to sunset outside. And
Oh,
actually I was happy, like despite the injury, I was, joyful and energetic and feeling really good and super suntanned. But I did all my work outside. But yeah, it took that, to actually do that little experiment. It's
how
very
do I
interesting.
live like that? Would you just tell me?
And my gut
Listen
healed.
to this podcast and learn.
Yes, yes, there's so much wisdom in this podcast, for sure.
That's
Oh,
great. It's really great because it's just missing, isn't it, in our awareness?
It
mhm.
is, yeah. And I think that's where we talked just ahead, about collaboration, and this Dr. Cruz told me personally about a week ago about how we've been so siloed, these different phys. And if you watch, he said the movie Oppenheimer, if you watch that movie, it showed how these scientists were all siloed and not talking to each other. And I think it's happening. People are more open to collaborating, and I think the more we collaborate and get different people with different theories all talking, I think
I
we're
think
all
it's
gonna.
happening because we're willing to step outside the institutions that control our thinking and our
Mm,
behavior. There's too much, we're incentivized to not be creative in the institution, but out here in the online space where people are putting more stuff online and collaborating because of
mhm.
technology. I mean, this is really the upside of all this technology that has a dark side, is that
That's
we're
right.
connecting and collaborating quickly and things are moving and they're moving down here at a sort of a grassroots level because this is sort of wikiized what we're all doing with our channels and so on. And we're wikiizing our way into a rising awareness that's going to bring us some salvation. Because if we stick with the stuckness of tenure and turfism, I mean, you have to hide your research from your colleagues until after you publish. So you spend 10 years not collaborating.
Oh my God, I never thought about that.
Yeah, because it's competitive. You want to be the one who gets the credit for it, you see. It's all about the ego and your tenure and your status and your stature in the field.
Yeah.
And you've already committed your whole career to a certain idea, you're not going to let Sally come along and say, hey, that idea about those dark leafy greens being good for prevention, what if we backed off on that as a prevention message in nutrition? Do you think
Mhm.
anyone in the academies would collaborate with me on that? I've tried. They will
Mm.
cancel meetings rather than listen to the research that's available to them that I'm willing to highlight for their
Mm.
you can't
And it's,
your ego will get in the way of truth.
but you, even you must need help with all, there's so much research to be done.
Oh my gosh, we could, thousands of us could be working on this. We really need to like refine the way we collect data and characterize this illness and start collecting it in clinics and be able to universally characterize this because shows up so individuality in the expression of who's sick and with what. You can be really, really sick with oxalate poisoning and only have neck pain. It's like, oh, my neck is driving
Mhm.
me crazy kind of
Mhm.
pain. Who would
Mhm.
suspect that's because you eat, chia bowls and almond snacks and you sneak your dark chocolate? Who would suspect that it's because you like Reese's peanut butter cups, that your neck is killing you and you're poisoning yourself? So you were saying, Laura, that you can identify it in your clients and you can see the oxalate
Mhm.
toxicity. Once you get it, once you understand it, it becomes obvious.
Mhm.
But the way we
When you
structure,
do, when you look at their food diary, especially.
yeah, exposure. Exposure's high, guaranteed with time there's going to be problems there. And even if they're silent, they're under the hood, right?
Mhm.
But
And
are
they're
some,
interfering with any other healing. Any other health problem is going to stay a problem if you're silently poisoning yourself on your peanut butter,
yeah, wow, right.
right? You can't keep eating a poison and heal something else. Even if the problem is something else, this stuff is enough to get in the way of healing.
Are there some people though, like some lucky people that still have Oxalobacter, for
Yeah,
example,
I
that
think there
can
is.
eat peanuts, every day, for example, and yeah, and
You
might get
can't, you
away.
don't have any research to prove that.
No,
So
right,
there's
no.
no way you can claim there's any, you can wish for that and you can state it over and over again on your Instagram channel, but you can't prove it because most of your oxalate absorption is happening in the stomach and the upper small intestine. Within 40 minutes, you've poisoned your circulating immune cells. So even though later the colon will help pull it out of the bloodstream because you have oxalobacter, the damage is done. You've already got it in your vascular system. So yeah, it's the bacteria is going to help you remove it. And so you may not get as many accumulations, but in the meantime, you have chronic sinus infections every year and tooth pain, and you have yeast infections and bladder infections or whatever. You're compromising your ability to have a functioning immune system and potentially ruining the barrier function of your gut because you're eating crystals and acid that's harming the poor mucosal lining in your throat, stomach, intestines, and so on.
So
So you can
leaky gut.
dabble and pretend it's okay, but that doesn't make it true. And we don't have the science to say, oh, yeah, just if you don't have symptoms, eat whatever you want. People are saying that if you don't have kidney stones, eat whatever you want. That's a pretty dangerous attitude. If you met any of the people who come to me in my classes or my clients, you would realize how dangerous an attitude that is because some of us, our lives are practically over. It's so bad,
Hmm.
unfortunately.
Hmm.
And just the basic aging. Do you really want your teeth to fall out? Do you really want to have cavities or caps or implants? Do you really want to lose your vision and get osteoporosis and osteoarthritis and have failed joints and need joint replacement? And do you really want dialysis or diapers or any of those things? You potentially, if you do this, you can avoid a lot of that stuff.
Hmm.
Right.
Oh, I don't know what idea, but so many people I know, their issues are all coming up, and it's going, oh my God, even more so than I knew before, just
Yeah.
from this interview.
Oh,
Wow.
cool.
Yeah, this is really great. So we always ask a signature question, so we're at the end here. We want to be respectful of your time. What does quantum healthy mean to you? Or through your lens, what does healthy mean to you? What would you wrap that up with?
Well, ultimately, you want to be able to be who you're meant to be and express that in the world and really have the energy and the brain space and the functionality, physical well-being, which is also emotional well-being, to pursue who you are and be that creative force in the world that you're meant to be. And if you're sick, that's going to be hamstrung. And there's simple things you can do, like swap a few foods out, be aware that a more ancestral approach, kind of whole foods ancestral approach, which does include animal foods in the diet and does not include chia bowls, juicing, smoothies. None of that is ancestral. Picking out on these superfoods, dark chocolate, simple concept, really simple. Think old-fashioned, sunshine, running, playing, joy, love. You really need to have a bit of fun. Endorphins and oxytocin and sunshine and not poisoning yourself. Sounds fun, doesn't it?
Yes, what a wonderful way to close.
Sally, let's just make sure we have all your offerings, how people can reach you. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The best way to find me is my website, which is Sally with a Y, K, middle initial, Norton, sallyknorton.com. You can reach us there. You can email us there. You can find about group classes. I don't have the bait. I've got to get around to like embedding more YouTube stuff because I would love people to visit my YouTube channel. It has about 20 shorts and about 13 testimonials that are about 13 minutes apiece. And you can meet some people who've greatly suffered and who are greatly benefiting from doing this work. And you may get inspired, by a pilot or a kettlebell guy or some really fun people who care about you enough to share their story. And then, of course, I'm on Instagram when I can be. And that's the best way. Just come to my website. And definitely, one thing I want everybody to know is if you're out looking for stuff by Sally, the world of book selling only sells this book, and all the other things you will see on places like Amazon are scammy knockoff stuff. They might say they'll put my name on it. It's just, this is all I got. Except if you go to my website, I've got the data companion, and
Okay.
this is only available on my website. You cannot get all this oxalate data in the book by me that's been vetted and carefully took 5 years unless you come to my website. So
Okay.
you'll find knockoff stuff out there, but you've got any mainstream book outlet will sell you this in any of 5 or 6 languages in paperback. And in English, you have also audiobook. And you can, of course, can get an ebook and all those. So it's available in Chinese, Vietnamese, Polish, French, German, and something else.
But the data
Spanish.
companion is not your cookbook. You have a cookbook as
Well,
well.
on my website, I've had this PDF cookbook since 2020, and I'm converting it so it's like this with the spiral bound and print on demand. And it hasn't been uploaded yet. It's probably still not going to be available till the end of April of 2020.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that we've had a lot of delays and lots of things, and that's another delayed thing. But that cookbook is very popular. It'll teach you how to use rutabaga and cabbage and turnips and turnip greens and stuff you're not used to. And if you haven't cooked an egg in a long time, I've got all the expert tips on how to cook eggs separate. So in the cookbook, there's almost no dairy, there's no gluten, there's no soy, and the eggs are corralled to their own chapter. So it's for people who are super sensitive and need to be careful about the common allergens, soy, gluten, dairy, eggs, so it's designed for people who've blown out their health and their gut like me.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful. Those are great resources. Thank you.
Thank you both. It's
Thank
been
you.
so fun to be with you and chat with you. I'm looking forward to another party sometime with you guys.
Sounds good. Well, thank you, Sally, for your disabling health journey and coming out the other side. And thank you for all the tireless education that you do, your books, your videos, your insights into all, these anti-nutrients, and actually today for highlighting that oxalates are the top one in your perspective, and all the safety stuff, with the dumping that you've provided for the world. Thanks for connecting the dots with the Vulvar Pain Foundation. I learned about that in 2015, and
Oh,
so many women have suffered. I had
pelvic
no
issues,
no idea.
pelvic floor, autoimmune conditions, dropping pelvic floors, pain and problems, sexual dysfunction, endometriosis. Yeah, oxalates are a big piece of that unhappiness, and it can really be disabling. So thank you, VP Foundation. If we didn't have Joanne Yon doing the VP Foundation, I would not be here because I
Hmm.
would never have figured this out.
Hmm.
And it's like just a little thread of information can be such a salvation. And I just am so touched that I was finally able to be rescued and that my effort to pass that forward is working out really well because we've now the word oxalate is becoming a thing and I'm getting to meet people like you and we're continuing to pass it forward. So grateful.
You were a run or you were so disabled with your feet, is my understanding that, and now you can do things like run
I
at
can run
61.
barefoot. I can run without
Yeah.
shoes. I couldn't even do the dishes without shoes. The day I
Well,
got married, I could stand to shower, I could stand for the ceremony, and I had to sit on a stool because I was in sneakers with orthotics inside them at my wedding.
I was you with disabling, yeah, plantar fasciitis for 35 years. And I had a chiro tell me, you're the worst case we have ever heard of. And that was me. I had to sit all the time, could never wear heels. If I did, I'd bring heels to the
Yes,
function, wear them for about, just for
20 minutes.
pictures at the beginning. And then I'd have my, my Birkenstocks or whatever it was. And I was even told I had to wear these kind of things in the shower. So yeah, my heart goes out to you
You're
because I
saying that
know
in past tense because now you're better.
I'm better. Oh yeah, so much better. But it's been a number of things that I've done. But yeah, I've been on a low oxalate diet since, well, no, I can't say that because I did
You
the
did the
challenge.
medical medium thing. You've been in
Oh
and
yeah.
out of it.
Yeah, but all my recipes that I gave to my clients over the years, I've always given this low oxalate, alternative. Yeah.
What a
So
great.
and just
Sometimes
one
our
of
suffering is necessary so we don't pass on our
I
mistakes.
know.
Mhm.
It's true. I'm hopeful people are going to listen to today and have some light bulbs go off that certainly when, for the neurotoxic part today with the bladder. Thank you so much. Yeah, you're going to help a
You
lot of
see, I
people
mean,
with
it's so nice that you're sharing your story because it makes so other people feel like they're not alone,
that.
because there's a lot of people in your situation with foot pain that can't be explained and bladder problems and pelvic problems and grumpy moods. I mean, neurotoxicity means anxiety, lack of motivation, um, flat affect where you just don't care. I mean, you're like a teenager and your brain, you can get so bad that you've got panic attacks and depression. This is neurotoxicity, and people are now on opioid drugs and antidepressants, and they're at their wits' end for how to live like a normal human and have some joy again. And
Mhm.
oxalate can cause those kind of problems.
They're never getting to the root cause. They're just
Yeah.
band-aids, solutions,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Coping.
Well, thank you so much for everything and all the help.
Thank
Sending
you.
all the love your
Thanks for
way.
your interest. It's really lovely to meet you, ladies. And I'm grateful that you've got an audience that might pick up on this. Thank you.
Oh, absolutely, they will. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening. We'll see you next time. Thank you for sticking around to the end of this podcast. We want to thank our sponsor, VIVARAYS, who allows for us to get this information to you. They offer top of the line blue blocking glasses, which, as we know, are critical for our health these days for blocking artificial light at night. Over 90% of our time is spent indoors under artificial lights, and this puts us all prone to circadian rhythm disruption. You can use the code Quantum Healthy for a discount. Link is in the show notes.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Endia at endiaray.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.